No, it's like I can do all stuff. Testing 1, 2. I'll be right. Put on a Batman mask. Show our meeting. Attention spam. Yeah. I hate looking at it. I hate hearing myself.
The first thing is that if you reference it, like I find myself staring at myself on the screen instead of reference to it's one of the bad things about
Yeah. Travel time. I was trying to do that.
Patrol center now.
Hopefully it'll get a little easier down the line.
This isn't Flanders, 206, but we're from our group is in Mountain County. It wasn't bad. It was like an hour and 10 minutes. Not too much traffic on 287.
Show up as Jack or somebody else.
Yeah, we came up with a little early. Stopped at one pizza place. Brothers Pizza. Yeah, they have everything, not just pizza. After projects. Some of the sites we have to go to in Camden, Newark. Sometimes my phone
just to let you know who's in the audience, we also would like hybrids, and we also got people on 15. So it look like we're welcome to the wall. All right. Roll call.
Mr. Mandalay? Here. Ms. Greenfield? Here. Mr. Freedy?
Here.
Notice of this meeting is provided on the and the Star Ledger, and posted on municipal bulletin board on December 27th, 2021. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first presentation, I am very excited to say, is our winning tennis team. So exciting. It's been a great year. I'd like to introduce American team and kind of Working what they did.
Well, first, on behalf of the team, I would like to thank you and all the members of the council for inviting them. I've been teaching in the district for 20 years. I see some familiar names of former students or people I've delivered signs during COVID when they graduated from 8th grade. And I've never been up here, and it is just wonderful for them to also to see, in the civics and grade in high school. So to see it really pretty amazing. I've been in my former towns meetings, but thank you so much for honoring them. As a coach, basically, I just help to steer them and drive them as the van driver to the games. It was all the credit. Yes, it was, Mr. Hoppy likes us to have our CDLs. We save money and we know how important these treasures are. Not to say that when I drive my own biological children, I'm reckless, but the 7 in front of you are the 7 who won the sectionals. That was at home. We were the #1 seeds. There was some pressure, the #1 seed. And then they took the trip on Friday, June 3rd, and that's where they defeated Haddon Township 3-2. At the very end, Dork Ozell, he's the one who had a super tiebreaker, so 11-9. It all hung, balance, could he, his legs, all 3 of the seniors at the end, they had the prom the prior day. So their legs were tired. I was worried about the AP stats field trip where they were walking around outside on that very, very warm May 31st, but I didn't really know that the dancing legs would be something so tough. And then in the finals, about an hour later, after this heroic win, everyone returned to the courts and we played last year's Group 1 winner, Glen Rock. So we beat Glen Ridge at home, not to be confused, there are lots of Glens out there, and Glen Rock 4-1, so 3-2, 4-1. And they really showed their mettle, M-E-T-T-L-E, their grit, and their love for one another. It was incredible. And they know, specifically Drew Elliott and his mother shared with me that it was 4 decades prior, the last time. I was graduating from high school, Princeton High School, in 1982. That's the last time Bernards won the Group 1 title. And so that's pretty amazing. There were 3 titles before that. And they went to the Tournament of Champions last Tuesday. So we could go tomorrow. They had to play Pingree. It would have been much closer, wouldn't have invested so much money in gas, but it is what it is. And Pingree has a great squad. And the young men, I think 3 of the matches went to 6-4, 7-5 in a set, very close. We had lost 4-1 when we played them at home, but at the Tournament of Champions, it is the last Tournament of Champions. So Bernards, for whatever reason, NJSIAA isn't doing it anymore. So they were able to go there, they won it. We have 3 seniors, Dork Ozell, Chris Sun, Drew Elliott, they're all captains. I like to call them the triumvirate. So I share that with the Bernardsville News. And then this is a young squad, so they are talented. And I did sign up to be a volunteer. I'm not a coach, so this is like the last time I'm donning my coaching jacket, but we have Finn Spitaleri of Bedminster, and I didn't say we have Bernardsville Dork Ozell, formerly of Bedminster. We have Chris Sun of Bedminster. We have Drew Elliott of Bernardsville, Finn Spitaleri of Bedminster, James Colvitis, and James and Finn and Drew, and this Frost, this freshman that I'm going to mention, are all members of the highly acclaimed Bernards High soccer team as well. So James Colvitis, one of the soccer stars, Devin Gandhi, sophomore, and the youngest on the team are a freshman, Neil China. So they are as pleased as I am to represent Bernards tennis team. There are 6 others who weren't able to make it because you only have so much room in the front, and they're the ones who are featured everywhere. So, but thank you. And they're great student athletes. I just want you to know that we tell them on the course, and as coaches, student comes before student athlete for a reason, that it's your academics first, and lots of APs, and they've been great, the triumvirate, sharing that whole college experience, which was a very tough year, as some of you know from the news, with, with pandemic. So thank you to everyone at home and in person for vetting our student athletes who brought us 3 championships: Skyland, Valley Division, Sectional, and State Regional.
Excellent, thank you so much. And for those who may have been at the Faces of Bernardsville event, Pat was one of our featured faces. She had her portrait done. It was a really great event. It's so great to have you all here. We are thrilled, and I gave Pat a copy of the Star Ledger.
They signed it, thank you.
The Star Ledger never covers Bernardsville. So, and if they're on this thing, they should know that. That was terrific that they gave us it's a half a page at least.
And they had about 60 different pictures from the sectional wind. It was
terrific to open the paper and see our town and our kids in the Sunday Ledger was just really impressive. So I have a proclamation here that I'm going to read, and each of you will get a copy. And I apologize ahead of time, we had one typo in it, but we'll fix that. So I will read the proclamation of the mayor of the Borough of Bernardsville. Whereas the Bernards High School boys tennis team was the top seed in NJSIAA Group 1, and whereas as the top seed, the Bernards High School tennis team defeated Dayton 5-0 in the sectional quarterfinals, defeated Cedar Grove 5-0 in the sectional semifinal, and defeated Glen Ridge 4-1 in the finals to win the NJSIAA Group 1 championship. And whereas we do hereby acknowledge and congratulate Coach Patricia McMillan, along with the outstanding members of the tennis team, Neil Gianna, Drew Elliott, Devin Gandhi, Dora Ozell, Finn Spitaleri, James Pilates, and Chris Sun. Now therefore, I, Mary Jane Canos, Mayor of the Borough of Bernardsville, by the authority vested in me in representing the Borough Council of the Borough of Bernardsville, do hereby congratulate the Bernards High School boys tennis team and proclaim Monday, June 13th, 2022 as a day of celebration recognizing the achievement of the team. So, thank we will correct the misspelling on congratulations. Thank you, congratulations. And I love the ties and jacket shirts. I love your shirt. And I'm feeling very short. Congratulations. Well done, congratulations. So you guys are all good to see you. Okay. Sure. Congratulations. Wonderful. Wonderful. Of course, thank you. Yeah, and parents, thank you for coming and for sharing your, I know it's a busy time of year, so we really appreciate you coming out for this. Charlie wants a group picture.
Okay. So I don't want to block them. Is there any way that we can kind of like, could we go like,
Sure. You guys just turn around and face
or,
the
yeah, something like that so that we can have them. Yeah, I want the council. Oh, they'll stand up? Okay. Well, then we got
Or maybe you guys want to stand back here. Why don't you do that?
Jenny, you have to stand. You can stand.
Squish it, try to shake hands with guys.
All right, come on.
I'm like, we need the I feel like I'm back in high school.
All right. If this camera, you guys are far enough, you're gonna have to squish together more. I got it. So if we all, it's a fit, Here,
got
put your hand on my shoulder because I'm holding out. It's my tippy toes as high as I can go.
So I can do what?
I don't want to fall.
No more plank, no more plank. No more plank. No more plank. Okay. Coach, put it, please. Yeah.
She is the cutest. I want you to be my tennis coach. Ours drove the bus too. And I'll never forget him, Mr. Skirbo, Coach Skirbo. He also taught me how to drive.
It was working 10 seconds ago. Well, I'm not gonna be able to get your picture for you.
That's okay. I'm sure someone will get it.
Is this flash?
No, it doesn't like us.
Flash needed.
Sounds like it's so tiring.
It's not like it's not like the movie, The lighting.
There you
The
go.
calves are starting to really burn.
No.
Edit it again.
That's okay.
That's good. Congratulations, guys. Congrats. Congrats.
Congratulations.
And if you like, you can stay for the rest of your meeting.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and nobody else stays. That's all. Well, I can go home and get a compliment. There you go. No, I couldn't get it.
I was like. Congratulations, guys. Great food.
All right, next up on our agenda is a presentation by Suburban Engineering, who has been working on our recreation plan based on our comprehensive recreation plan that we completed last year, and they have been taking the phase one and working through it. Tom, I will let you explain the whole back.
Sure, well, as you said, Mary,
Do you need to be like one of these things?
I don't think so. All right, we're good.
Okay.
I'm good. Yes. Soon after the mayor and council adopted the master plan, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, they authorized us to do an RFP to seek out a Parks and Recreation engineer to start implementing various aspects of it. There were a number of small items that we were able to start tackling on our own, like fixing infields and where there were some hazardous areas, and painting over at some of the parks, just making things look better, ordering some furniture. But some things we needed an engineer for, and after conducting a few interviews, council decided on hiring Suburban engineers to work on the first phase of the master plan. The direction from the committee, Public Works Committee, and from council was, let's try to work on having something for everyone. So council identified a few priority projects, some paths, some trails, some active recreation facilities, but generally things that would make the parks more appealing and comfortable to everyone, and then add to the value of the community as a whole. So soon after we got started, we walked all the places that council identified. We met again with the Public Works Committee, Engineering Committee, and the Finance Committee, and then last week we met with the Recreation Committee to show them the initial concepts to make sure we were heading in the right direction. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our two guests. We have Joe Perillo and Chris Kemper from Suburban Engineers. So we're going to walk you through the 4 projects that they are presenting as a concept plan right now. I would just ask you to note that we don't know what the price of any of this is going to be. We have some general ideas, but until we go out to bid and really see how the market responds, and it's a crazy market right now. We won't know for sure, but we just want to make sure we're heading in the right direction. So, gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tom. My name's Joe Perrello, Principal and the Vice President of Suburban Consulting Engineers. I'm a landscape architect and a park planner. With me is Chris Kemper, also a licensed landscape architect, Parks and Recreation designer. Combined, we have over 55 years of experience between the two of us, and then in addition to the rest of our team. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to present where we're at with the conceptual plans. We've been working with Tom and other members of the Borough, Department of Public Works, Engineering, the Department of Parks and Recreation. And as Tom explained, we have been out to each site, walked each property, developed some concepts and some ideas to develop input, to get the input and develop a list of all the items that were identified in a wish list of items on the main projects. So Chris is going to present and share his screen of what we have done conceptually, just an overview of where we're at, and take it away, Chris.
Hi, so thanks for having us here tonight. So, sorry. As Tom and Joe both said, we were tasked to start coming up with conceptual designs for some of the project areas that were focused in the recreation master plan. So some of the two project areas we were introduced to first would be the Polo Grounds and then the 271 Brook Road site. So at the Polo Grounds, one of our tasks was to design a connector pathway to reach the Audubon property where there's some existing trail network. And then also within the Polo Grounds, we were tasked with designing sports lighting and as well as a multi-purpose building at the synthetic turf field. So the multi-purpose building would house a community / meeting room, concession area, and then restrooms. And then the second project site, the 271 Brook Road site, that was really about establishing a trail within the wooded area, another perimeter trail in the open lawn area, and then doing some parking and driveway improvements to help with accessibility to the site. So the Polo Grounds site, this is just an overall aerial image just showing the site. So we have sort of the one project area, which is the connector path, and then the second project area around the synthetic turf field, which includes the multi-purpose building and the sports lighting. And this is just a little bit more zoomed in of the two areas. This is roughly the connector trail area and then the multi-purpose and sports lighting. So the connector pathway, just, very, very simple. Originally, when we walked the site, well, actually prior to walking the site, we were told that we wanted the pathway sort of on this side and to come down here and connect to the existing trail on the Audubon property. However, when we walked the site, you can see this is a very steep slope here, and it made more sense to actually come in on the other side of the existing soccer field and connect in up here. It's a much flatter area, so you have less grading to deal with, and then trying to get a relatively accessible slope down into this area. Just you'd have to deal with a bunch of switchbacks, where here you have a much more direct approach. So it's difficult to see from the existing mapping we had, but this is the sort of perimeter gravel trail that's around the baseball fields now. So it's our understanding that this is going to be paved as part of another project. So we'll be picking up right here and basically connecting a path between this slope and this existing soccer field that will lead you down here to a sort of naturally occurring clearing in this sort of vegetation line along the property. We're not proposing to do anything with the bamboo grove, just do, the bare amount of clearing necessary to make a nice open entryway here into the existing trail network. Right now, we're showing a 10-foot wide pathway, but we're gonna make it the same width as whatever this improvement is to this pathway. So that could change, and we had included these just sort of little bump outs here, just in case you have people in a wheelchair and it's a narrow access, you have, a spot here to stand by until you have room to pass. Again, if it's a 10-foot pathway, these aren't really necessary, but if for some reason it would become a narrower pathway, you might want to consider these. You would still have space here, outside of the field of play, so it doesn't interfere with anything with the field. Material-wise, we're proposing porous asphalt pavement, and then switching over to something more like gravel or wood chips before you get to this existing storm drain line.
I can add one thing. Prior to our involvement with it, the borough employees and staff were already planning improvements to the existing path that is around the site. There's a gravel path, people walk around the polo grounds. They use it to access the fields and for exercise. But originally envisioned the path connection to the lower side of that field, as Chris explained. But when we all walked the site, we walked that area and we saw the slope, and then we meandered a little bit further up the line there, and I took it upon myself to walk into the woods because I saw a couple of ribbons hanging on the side there, and I noticed that it must have been a volunteer group or somebody else already starting to clear out some underbrush or trees, or maybe it was an Eagle Scout or Boy Scout project or something, but somebody was doing some other clearing or work already on the Audubon site. And I said, hey, the grade here is kind of natural. We just do some minor clearing, hardly any grading, and we could connect into those existing paths that are there right now. So eventually it's going to be an entire loop, a link that goes through that property and extends further to the north and east, and then into this site in the park where people can have a whole trail system. And maybe as part of master planning it all, there's a network connection with the trail and information that shows all the links together, because that's what it's about when you talk about trails, the linkages, linking up to other sites, trails, and other places, other nodes, especially public nodes, parks and schools and libraries and those type of things. So even though this doesn't look like a whole lot on a plan, this little connection, there was a lot of thought that went into this from even before we were involved. The borough team, the parks department, Tom and engineering people, that when we walked the site, it just seemed to be a natural to like, hey, let's make this work and connect it and put it in there. So kudos to Tom and the team that were already figuring all this out based on the recommendations in the master plan that the borough had already had ideas about. Chris, do you want to, if there's any questions on this, or you want to go over to the next site and explain, this here? You want to go to the next? Yeah. We can take questions at the end.
Just interrupt briefly. That path also helps anyone with a handicap to get to those fields where right now they can't.
Yes,
right.
It will be fully accessible.
If a walker or a wheelchair wanted to go watch a game, they really can't get there now. And that would allow them to do that.
Exactly right.
Yep. So sticking with the polo grounds, this was sort of the second project area there. And that involved sports lighting for the existing synthetic turf field, as well as trying to site a multi-purpose building, which I said would house a community/meeting room, restrooms, and then a concession space. The sports lighting, I mean, that's pretty, I don't want to say self-explanatory, but I mean, we reached out. Six poles.
Show them the location.
Yeah, so these are the locations of the sports lighting. This we reach out to, the Musco Lighting, they specialize in sports lighting, so they have the field dimensions and they site all of these light poles, so you're only getting the light on the field and it's at the correct levels that it needs to be for the different sports that are played here. And for the building, you know, when we were out there, we were looking to find the best place you could locate this, given the site. And there really isn't a lot of space out here because, you know, you have so much programming going on. So this area here behind this backstop and the backstop on the synthetic turf field really had the most available space to be able to put anything there. And then also in terms of bringing utilities to the building, water and sanitary, they're gonna have to be hooked up to Sini Drive, which is, you know, off this way, plus or minus 900 feet. So really trying to put this building anywhere else, you're just gonna drive up costs, you know, with utilities. So this really makes the most sense. It's closest to all the parking. And you can fit roughly a 25 by 70 foot building here. You know, you could go a little bit wider in terms of width. We reached out to some manufacturers who deal in prefabricated buildings. So these buildings are already pre-designed and prefabricated before they're delivered to the site and pretty much dropped in place, almost ready to go. Of course, there's some final utility connections that have to be made in the field. You still leaves you with space to set up a little picnic area, and just, you know, it makes the most sense. This is a relatively flat area. There is an existing retaining wall here. You would likely have to modify the wall and extend it a little bit just to terrace out this area to make a flat space to construct the building. And this is just sort of one of the initial layouts we received from the manufacturer. We've already received some comments from the rep committee this past week about making some modifications to it, but it has a community room that can fit, you know, 25 to 30 people pretty comfortably. Then you have women's room, men's restroom, a family restroom, and then you have a pretty large concession area with room to pretty much do a full sort of commercial kitchen build out. One of the comments we received from the rec committee was just about moving all the restrooms to one side and all the concession space to one side, so that way you still have a connection to this community room and the concession area. So we reached out to the manufacturer and they've already modified the floor plan. So we'll have some updates to share the next time.
How many stories is that building?
It's just a one-story building.
Would it have like, would it be like just standard like concrete, or would it have like windows that maybe people could stand in the community room?
Yeah. So this is just sort of examples from some of the manufacturers' websites of, you know, roughly what these buildings could look like. These don't do a great job at, you know, showing any windows, but yes, you can add windows so you can have a clear line of sight to the ball fields from the community room, from the concession area. And you can also have the opportunity to sort of build these overhangs there and have a nice covered sitting area where all the picnic tables are.
That would be good to have some space for the kids to go for some lightning storms and stuff.
Yeah. During the rec committee meeting, we talked about possibly doing an overhang like this straight off of the meeting room area, so sort of doubles that space in a way if the weather's.
Yeah, those canopies could be extended further out. Right now, we're working with conceptual design and some information that was available from different manufacturers. So, you know, a lot of park buildings, as we call them, a lot of times those canopies extend out, you know, 25, 30 feet or more, where you can fit, you know, 4 to 6 picnic tables under them where you can have a gathering. Sometimes recreation departments have permits where, they have little kids' birthday parties and gatherings, or when, especially when there's storms that come by, lightning for shelter, rain, mistiness, and it creates a nice space as a gathering space. In a lot of parks departments, they have summer camps, or they set up camp events. Maybe they'll do arts and crafts under the canopy. There'll be access to the concession area, the restrooms. And what's nice about this building is the community space, the community building. It's probably about the size of this room, if not bigger. I can't see those dimensions on here.
It's
but-
roughly 22 by 24.
Yeah, so it's not too much off the size of this building or this room that we're in, but, it has a lot of options to it, and you can customize it with what you want in it, as far as windows, as far as finishes, textures, electricity, audio visual, etc.
So obviously, you buy the good prefabricated route, because it saves cost versus a custom build. So I'd love to hear a little more about that. It sounds like you can customize it, but is there any more deterioration that exists with a structure like that, or not really?
They're actually stronger built. I mean, you could stick build a structure like this, and this is all block. It's all block walls. It's not stick built with 2x4s or 2x6s. Where if you stick built it, you're spending more money on site work and labor, prevailing wage of everything that has to be built on site. Prefab, these units, some of them, there's different kinds. Some of them are in sections, and they're shipped to the site in, say, 3 or 4 sections, and they go together and they put the roof on top. Other ones, some of them are a kit. The one gentleman from, I think it was engineering, was it Doug? Doug looked into one system they looked at, and he goes, hey, I'm looking online, I see this, I like to look at it. I'm like, yes, we worked with that company before, but it's a kit, it's a block kit where they ship all the block out, and then you got to put the whole thing together, on-site labor and everything. So there's a number of different companies and manufacturers. We've worked with at least 5 or 6 of them, and there's different options. And then it's really getting the layout right as it develops beyond conceptual design and a ballpark estimate that will be developed. When you get into schematic design development, you get your layout prepared, and then you can decide later as you move forward with the project, do we want to go prefab, or do we want to have it stick built? And we have an architect on the team to design it, customize it exactly, anything that you would want. So really conceptually, it's figuring out the spatial relationships between the different rooms and uses and the options of what it could look like. And it's like all in the beginning phases right now. So that's what, ourselves and Tom and the rest of the team from the borough, we'll be working on as it continues.
Does it have HVAC, like air conditioning, heating? Is that been put in plans?
Yeah. Most of them, have that. It has a kitchen. A lot of them that we've done, we've just done some other recent ones on a new 30-acre park that we're designing, and actually it's built right now, where they have almost a commercial kitchen, where they have the setup for a space. It's got 3 grease traps. I mean, the kitchens in these things are beautiful, that you see some of these, everything's stainless steel, and, some of them are over the top, and the more you put in it, the more it's gonna cost in the end.
How big is that, the building that's on site now, the field house that's across the whole field?
This
Size-wise?
over here.
Can you get a dimension off of that, or guesstimate what this is? I don't think you have the whole building on the survey.
No. Looks like it's maybe like 30 feet long, but I don't know how
Yeah,
deep
in
it is.
relationship to this, Yeah, and this building's 25 feet wide.
Right.
By 75 foot long, so it's similar, in dimension, and it works well that way because that's how the spaces can all kind of coexist with each other. I mean, you could make something squarer, but then, and sometimes it ends up, you have more waste in a space in a square type of building as lieu of laying it out this way.
Probably at least double the size.
Yeah, and then I'm just assuming that the retaining wall that's up on the, I guess that would be north, doesn't interfere with that existing softball field, or?
No, I mean,
The field on the top?
you're talking like
Lot.
right here behind the backstop. Yeah, no, it shouldn't. Right now, I mean, it should be at least minimum 10 feet off of the back of this backstop.
So it's outside the field.
Yeah, it's outside of the field.
There is the other one, I guess, would remain. So, because they use that for like storage, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we've been told. The other building would remain.
Yeah, if I may, just from a practical experience, point out that although this serves a very important function for active recreation, I'll tell you firsthand what's going to start happening in the off season. People are going to rent it for birthday parties, shower retreats, you name it. I know the one community I was in, the League of Municipalities, rented it for the whole winter to conduct their certification trainings, or Department of Community Affairs, sorry. And it serves a lot of functions if you can have a restroom and a kitchen in an area that's very durable.
Yeah, and then the one in Chester that they have at one of the fields is always rented. They were having showers, they were having birthday parties, wedding rehearsals. Yeah, they get used a lot.
Yeah, some of the buildings we've done, they're multiple uses. They're used from anything from tots to seniors. They have senior gatherings, senior events. If you don't have a space for that now, because the nice thing about it is it's a newer building, it's fully accessible. It's easy to get in and out. There's no stairs. Everything's up to code and recent, the restrooms, the gathering spaces, everything from craft events to public gatherings, meetings, the sports leagues, crafts, and programming. In my town, they use a building. They have a daycare program, mommy and me classes and stuff in the morning and other stuff where, there's a lot of things that could be programmed into a space like this. So again, those were some concepts.
Yeah, these are just the example images of some of the prefab buildings. That brings us to the final project site, which is the 271 Minebrook Road site. And again, here we were mainly concerned with looking into how to improve this driveway, how to incorporate some parking, and then to do a sort of perimeter loop trail in this open lawn area, and then to also sort of develop a trail network back here in the wooded area. So currently, there is an existing one-way entrance and one-way exit to the site. In terms of getting anything done quickly, you kind of have to stick with this setup. Trying to get another entrance onto this road would be a very long process, and we were told that we want this space to be usable as quickly as possible. When you do turn into the site, if you're going over here to the actual 271 Minebrook Road site, you have a very sharp turn. It's like 45 degrees, so.
Maybe more than that. Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah.
Remember that little like island in the entrance?
Yes.
Yeah.
So with the tree.
Yeah.
Sticking out that you guys are around.
Yeah, so we would really want to try to get that as close to a 90-degree turn as possible to really make it easier to get over here to this parking area. And then there is an existing paved drive here. We would want to widen that to at least 16 feet, so that way you can get 2 cars driving by at the same time. We would keep this sort of sloped lawn area as the parking area. No pavement here, just keep it as lawn. Right now we have it sized to accommodate about 24 cars, so that's 12 stalls on each side. You could do something, like a concrete curb stop to delineate the spaces, so it's not just free for all. It's more delineated. There is an existing barn structure here, which we would propose to remove. You could maybe do some paved, more like accessible parking there, maybe not necessarily, you know, a striped ADA space. And then we're proposing a stabilized aggregate pathway around here. So that's basically like a very fine aggregate pathway, and then it has a special stabilizer solution that binds it together. So it actually creates an ADA compliant walking surface. And it's also, you know, relatively cheap surfacing material as opposed to something like concrete or asphalt. And it's right now this doing a loop around this entire area, you end up with about a quarter-mile distance for this loop. And it still leaves all this area open for the cyclo track. You can kind of see the track there. And then it also leaves room open, you know, if in the future the borough wants to, you know, add some additional stuff to this site, maybe an amphitheater performance area. And then the other area, the wooded slope, that's going to be a much more sort of naturalistic trail. Right now, you access is sort of from this corner of the site. There's an opening and it brings you down here. There's a small little stream, crosses a culvert and sort of goes up this way. So we would just sort of continue that track and do a perimeter around the site and maybe add in some you know, secondary pathways to any sort of focal points or points of interest. This would be about a half a mile for this sort of larger perimeter loop. And then if you add up these sort of secondary pathways, it gets it closer to 3/4 of a mile. This, we're proposing a very sort of naturalistic trail, just go with wood chips, something that's commonly used for surfacing trails like this. And I think that's really, you know, it for this site. Just
Will the entrance be wide, the actual entrance will be wide also?
The vehicular entrance of Brook Road? Yes, that's one of the items that the entrance needs to be updated. You'll need a DOT, it's a state road there, so we would need to work with New Jersey DOT based on the proposed use and the traffic that could be generated from a public facility such as this. So they're gonna have guidelines of what we can and cannot do to that entrance.
But the house would also share that entrance then?
Yes.
And they would just branch off, their driveway would just branch off? Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's the intention of what would need to be discussed with New Jersey DOT as getting this access permit, you know, for the improvement there. Obviously, it does need to be made wider and clearer vision, and you know, DOT will have comments and recommendations of what they would see would be appropriate to make the intersection better served for the community and the use that's there.
If you didn't have the request to make this space as usable as possible, what would your recommendation be for an entrance?
Well, again, the entrance would all depend upon the amount of potential people that would use the site. And I really can't make a suggestion on what I think the entrance should be. A lot of it's would have to be as required by the state of New Jersey, because it's a right of way to a state highway. And you can't just say, hey, I want to do this. You know, you may say, hey, I want to do 2 ways, you know, 1 way in, 1 way out, or they may say you may have to have 1 entrance coming in or 1 entrance coming out. You may not be able to make a left turn coming out of the site. There's going to be a lot of recommendations by the state of New Jersey to access the site and how it is to be improved.
As is, it's just very big. Yes, and you can't, like, if you wanted, it makes sense to try and come in where the parking is, but it's too close to the next road, so New Jersey,
Yes.
DOT will never let you do that, so close to the next street, so.
So it's easier to keep the two entrances
Yeah.
where they are and just make them wider.
Yeah.
I like the whole in out, in one way, out the other, because
Yeah.
I'm thinking around that turn,
Yeah,
and then if people see the car start lining up to make a left.
yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has to be improved, like visibility coming in and out, and then you have cars traveling on the road at a decent speed.
On the curve.
Yes.
On the curve, just be pray as you're going around that little turn, you're like, please don't let somebody come.
Yes,
But,
and
but definitely the turn onto that road needs to be
Yes.
fixed, because that's a really tight turn to make.
yeah, and those are all part of improvements that would need to be addressed in the improvements to the park. I mean, really, a lot of our goal is the improvements on the park site itself for the recreational purposes, but in order to make that feasible and usable and safe, the entrance definitely will have to be addressed.
So Mayor, one of the things we'd like to do, one Friday is invite the governing body, maybe members of the environmental commission to come out and walk the wooded area with us, help us kind of identify areas of concern, highlight areas of interest. I think this would be something that's going to be very much enjoyed, just to be able to walk through nature.
Yeah, it's a beautiful site, really.
I've been up there a lot, and what's the trails.
Because there are existing bridle trails there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They're sometimes hard to find and, you know, but.
Well, they're easy to find right now.
Yes.
You can do bike races.
Yeah, the bikes have been riding on them, but it really is pretty back there.
Can I just ask?
Yes, go ahead.
I remember, initial walkthroughs, there are two buildings near where the parking is. One's like a barn and one's like
A house.
chicken coop.
Right.
Not the guy's house.
No, there's a little white, one-level house building,
Yeah.
and then there's another one further across from that in the back. That's what's called the barn.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
one had the kitchen and the bathrooms, and the big meeting room, the fireplace.
Yeah.
So both of them.
So that.
No, I think the more like dwelling was gonna remain. It was the sort of
Yeah,
farmhouse.
You're talking about down further.
Yes.
The ones that were half falling apart.
Yeah.
They look like a chicken coop.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
yes.
And again, let me just remind anybody that's watching, this is only phase one. Like, this is not, we're gonna do this and then we're done. This is just the first phase of this whole master plan, so. And we prioritized it based on the feedback we got from the community, and that when we did that, the whole process of creating the plan.
Mayor, on the rec build, the building polo grounds, the direction from the committee was to, for Bob and staff to get together with the various sports teams and share with them to see what sort of thoughts or questions.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea.
So we'll be playing that.
Excellent.
Any more forward?
And the high school too.
No, that's it. Oh,
Mr. Happy.
Oh, so those are simple paths.
Yeah, this was just to sort of show, what those surfacing materials were, because when you say stabilized aggregate, most people don't know what that is, but it's.
Decomposed granite,
Yeah.
basically. It's not stone dust, but it's a hard material with a stabilizer in it, which firms it up and makes it ADA accessible, which is firm, stable, slip resistant. And it actually works well with moisture, rain, even in wet areas or in buffer areas where we do trails and wetlands. Whereas wood chips, it's a commodity, you could put it down, it keeps the surface, but unless they're really compacted and like a fiber material that's an engineered wood fiber, they're not really considered firm, stable, and slip resistant, but it is more accessible than an unfinished dirt path.
There are some wet areas there, especially this last rain, and when we were back there a week or so ago, there's several areas where it's wet and the chips get kind of mushy and
Yeah, the chips are 100% organic, it's wood.
Replacing them.
You have to keep
Yeah, it has
replacing
to be
it.
fresh.
They shift around, so there may be some areas where maybe you could use the chips, but then especially in the wetter areas or lower areas or areas that are more difficult, you can do the stabilized aggregate. I mean, to do the whole path with stabilized aggregate would be ideal, but it'd be very expensive. You probably want to do that in phases.
But you could do pieces of it.
Yeah, you could do
Yeah.
pieces. We do a lot of trails. A lot of them have both combination of services, and then some of them where we have to cross ravines or wetlands or areas. That's when we do a boardwalk, or we would do a raised boardwalk or something. And this property, there's really only one crossing right now over a ravine, creek, ditch thing. And then there's a culvert there, there's a pipe. So you really don't even need a bridge or a boardwalk over that. And the site is beautiful. I mean, walking through that, when we walked through it in the spring with the township, not a lot of the vegetation was out yet, so it was easy to walk around and see. And you can see the people use it. You can see that the neighbors that back up to it also, have to put up their signs that says, okay, this is the property boundary, stay out. If you go any further, you encroach. So there could be some kind of marking system developed that helps delineate the property line to protect those neighbors.
Any other questions?
I just had a question about the, going back to the first slide with the walkway connecting between Upper and Lower Evancow, the field at Polo. Is there a I'm just wondering why porous pavement?
Well, state of New Jersey passed new stormwater management rules in March of 2021. Those rules are also being updated in the next couple of weeks that not everybody's aware of yet, and not all the rules are made public yet. The porous asphalt is used for a number of reasons. One, it's more environmentally friendly than just regular asphalt, which would have a lot more runoff, which right now there's just soil and grass, so it's 100% pervious. So if we put in regular asphalt, would increase the impervious cover and area on the site, and that area is at the bottom of the hill, and then there's the path, and then there's the field. We didn't want to create an area that would produce more runoff. So the impervious regular asphalt, the water's got to go somewhere. Yeah, it could dissipate and go into the field. We didn't want to increase more drainage or hard surfaces going onto the field. We wanted to work with something that, yes, it's a firm, stable, slip-resistant surface. It's low maintenance. It's asphalt, and you're not going to have to redo it all the time.
And as far as the stabilized aggregate, would that be considered impervious?
It's partially impervious.
That's what I'm just saying, that you just showed
Yeah,
a slide of it.
If you use that there, you could use it there, but we know that area, there's a lot of people that stand and sit in that area to watch the games. And the teams sit there. Yeah, so people, you can sit on the grass on the hill, but something like the asphalt, it's not gonna get, it won't get overly compacted and ruts. The stabilized aggregate is good for surfaces. We use it at schools, we use it on walkways, we use it in trails. But when you have a situation like that, where you may get a lot of people standing, muddling around, waiting for games, watching games, the asphalt is a better choice. And we chose pervious asphalt just for the reason of being, having less runoff and requirements.
As far as installation costs, over regular asphalt or stabilized aggregate, would you have a guesstimate 2 or 3 times as expensive?
No, it's not 3 times. It's probably not even 2 times. I mean, we haven't developed all the estimated costs. We've discussed it briefly with the township, with the borough representatives, but overall, the cost of asphalt versus stabilized aggregate is maybe about 1.5 times.
And then porous
asphalt's a little more
You have a
Costly?
drainage calculation, because you have to retain all that water, so you're gonna, excavate.
Yeah, we're not at that phase yet. We're at
Right,
conceptual
right.
level, so that's all things that we can look through in design development. I mean, the goal is you can develop the path, the location out. You can even develop and design alternate products that could be in there. You can do it with asphalt, you can do it with pervious asphalt, you can do it with stabilized aggregate, you can do it with grass pavers. So a lot of that would probably be decided at a later phase
Right,
of
no,
design
I'm
development.
just bringing up points for
Yeah,
myself.
no.
I just saw it and I just wanted to ask the question. The other question that I do have with it is, you said it's low maintenance, but now you're talking about porous asphalt in an area that has grass on both sides of it, that's gonna get cut.
Mhm.
And you have now grass clippings that are gonna collect on top of it. So
Yeah.
now, how does that affect the longevity of that porous
It
asphalt?
doesn't affect the longevity. I mean, porous asphalt, to work properly, there's a maintenance system that, and I don't know if the borough has other pervious asphalt areas in town, but usually they recommend a sweeper vac. You do that, depending on the location, you may do it once a year, you may do it twice a year, where they go over it, and it's like a street sweeper, but a vac that sucks out.
Right.
Grass clippings aren't the problem, it's more sand, silt, or other things that would accumulate it goes into the pores.
Right,
into
yeah, it
the
just
asphalt.
clogs it, it's, like a grate, it just fills it up and it's gonna
Yeah.
block it.
Okay, can you put the community building back up again at the polo grounds?
Sure.
That's your one question.
The plan view or?
The site view. So where that building is, you have looks like a walkway that goes from the building and it goes to the driveway, the roadway.
Yeah, this is
It's
existing.
kind of, yes, exactly. Was there any thought given to actually I'm looking more by the parking lot driveway. Yeah, so right there, was there any thought given to sidewalks along the intersecting side where that connects? Because what happens is when there's a lot of people up there, right now, they dump out the driveway, they congregate, the driveway, they congregate in the travel lane. There's cars and people, not a good mix. The sidewalk would encourage people to walk to the parking lot on the sidewalk to the left, or walk to the parking lot on the right on the sidewalk, rather than go out into the driveway itself. There's considerable amount of traffic when events.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We can definitely add sidewalk connections to left, right
Just to
sides.
encourage people not to use the driveway as an area to congregate or walk.
Yeah, it's walking when people are trying to pull in and out.
It just dumps them right out into the street.
Exactly. Yeah, no, definitely good point. We can definitely add that.
With that driveway there, I would assume that there's some type of rule for access onto that field. We have the double gate right there now. So you have that existing drive that goes in there, but you also have a drive that goes all the way around Polo, around Veterans Field. So if you could kind of cut that straight instead of making that mark to the right, and either gain some access space or make that building bigger.
Yeah.
Because you have, right now, there's a drivable path to the left of the field that goes straight up, and then you have to go around and get to that driveway. Just again, right now you're working with an existing access, but I don't know what the rule is or the requirement for that access. You may be able to gain some space and, make that work a little bit better.
Sure.
Even if it was just a seating area or something, give yourself more of a seating area out there so that it's usable for the, pedestrians, and then the vehicular path goes straight past it.
Yeah, it's more for service, maintenance, et cetera.
Right.
Good point.
And also, not to belabor it, but, on the other side of the baseball field, you have the lights there, but there really is no walking path to get from that building to the upper right corner of the field. There's a set of stands there, but there is like a very narrow, it's maybe like 2 feet wide, it's on top of the existing retaining wall.
Yeah, we noticed that when we were out there.
Yeah, if there's something where you're gonna put lights in there, you're gonna restrict that access even more. maybe it should be widened to make it a walking path to include the lights.
Yeah, we plan to move, those lights can move back a little bit, but we're kind of restricted of how far back or we can go where there's a wall, but yeah, we could definitely make that work.
Yeah, and I'm assuming all LED lights.
Oh, yeah, all sports lighting now is LED. I mean, they still make the old metal halide stuff, but
Yeah.
the LED is much better,
And
less electricity
proposed
use.
utilities, electric and water, sewer coming from Stevie. There is, and again, I don't know what's up
There's
there.
electric out there.
Yeah, there's
Yeah, it's
existing
in a box.
electric out there with transformers and everything else. I'm
Yep.
assuming there'll be a survey done to see if maybe that could.
That's
feed
the
building.
idea,
Yeah,
exactly.
we have some of that information already, but the plan is to utilize depending what voltage and what's available
Right.
at that spot there, to use that, as much as
Yeah, I
possible.
mean, for at least that, you're going from, 1,000 feet to, 400 feet.
Yeah, I know the borough, when we met with them on site, they already explained to us that they ran electric down some time ago, and there's the box there, and, for future expansion.
Are we taking questions through Zoom at this point?
Well, actually, we should not be, because this is not the public session,
Okay.
unless the council would like to open it up.
One other question about the lighting, I guess.
Because technically, Mark,
We
you
do a
should
public
be
session
asking
in
questions right now.
minutes.
With the lighting,
Mark,
sorry.
this is not the
It'll go
public
into the
session.
rec. Still gonna send it to rec.
Record.
Oh, rec song,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
The teams.
Because we have one more presentation and then we have an open session. Yeah. So can we hold questions till then? Okay?
Yeah, that's good with us.
That, because Mary's waiting, I don't want to keep her here.
No.
You're fine.
And other, Tom, do you want to introduce the next presentation, and then we'll have an open session for questions on both these presentations.
Okay, so this evening, council has a resolution on the agenda to authorize us to respond to the state mandated directive that would deal with the dam. It's no longer a qualified dam under the rules. So we have a resolution that addresses that. What's proposed is that we remove the dam and replace it with a stream. The council has been addressing this matter for a number of weeks, has provided the public with many opportunities to participate in the process. We delayed a vote on this last time so that I can, at council's direction, invite members of the public to come in and meet and look over plans and concepts and maybe raise some questions that we didn't exactly address during the presentation. So I think we've arrived at a point where all the information is out there. I think we've answered as many questions that came our way as possible. And so we've also invited Mary Pace Goldman from Ripple Waters, who's done the hydrology work behind all this that led to the recommendation, to go through her presentation one last time, in case council has any more questions, and to get it out there to the public. I also understand the technology wasn't great the last time we presented, so we want to be as transparent and as communicative as possible on this project. So, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. All right. So this is the same presentation I gave last month, but I will go through it again, and I'm happy to take questions as I go through everything, so feel free to interrupt me as I go. Just for sort of the overview, this is where we are here at the municipal building, and we are talking about the dam that's located directly out the windows here around Memorial Park Pond. We talked through the benefits of doing the dam removal. There's quite a few benefits. There's a few cons as well, which we will go through in a few minutes. One of the biggest things that the dam removal achieves for the borough is reduction in long-term maintenance cost. With this pond, Ferrero presented information regarding how frequent the maintenance dredging needs to be conducted, and that's every 8 to 10 years currently, with an estimated cost of roughly $500,000 each dredging. The next thing that we talked through was liability regarding the dam ownership being removed. Currently, with the dam as it is, engineering inspections are required frequently, routine maintenance, and then there's the risk and liability of any sort of failure of the structure, impacts if somebody were to attempt to swim in the brook downstream of the dam. These types of structures sometimes draw children and other risk takers to attempt to swim there, and there's risk of drowning at that location. We would also be eliminating that risk when we remove the structure. Another benefit is restoring the fish habitat through the Mine Brook. So this structure does not have a fish ladder or any other accessible fish passage. So any fish swimming upstream currently reach the dam and are unable to pass through. We do have different fish that inhabit the pond. They're more associated with pond type habitats and not with free flowing rivers. So we would be able to restore that fish habitat here. This is a water course that has potential to have improved trout habitat, and Trout Unlimited in particular is interested in potential for improved fishing through the region. By removing the dam, we also improve water quality. For folks who've been using this park for the last few years, with the sediment and siltation that is currently in the pond, we have a very shallow water depth, and as a result, you end up with very warm temperatures, and the warm temperatures can lead to algal blooms. They can also lead to oxygen problems for the fish that inhabit the pond as well, because there's insufficient capacity. You end up with eutrophication and several other water quality issues that are associated with impoundments, in particular impoundments with large amounts of silt accumulated in them. When we remove the dam, we also restore that free-flowing movement of sediment. So in a river system, you have a natural amount of sediment that moves through it. For people who are avid fishermen or even outdoorsmen, you know that there are gravel bars that appear in a stream channel. You have a heavy rain, those gravel bars move. And when we have an impoundment or a structure, it cuts off the sediment transport to the downstream section. So we have what's called a sediment-starved section of stream downstream, because we've accumulated all this material in the impoundment, which is why we have this need for these maintenance dredgings that occur. So we have that, restored when we take out the structure. If we didn't remove the structure, we're subject to a lot of additional long-term regulation changes. With dam safety in particular, there's potential for increasing spillway design storms. We know that the structure would need to be upgraded, as Ferrero had provided their presentation regarding the upgrades that would be needed for the spillway. And that's only to address the current standard that dam safety has. The trend with precipitation and climate change in the region is such that it's not a safe bet to assume that we won't see an increase in precipitation and design storms that would be required for the spillways long term. So by taking the structure out, we don't have that sort of long-term need to continually reanalyze the hydrologic and hydraulic analysis for the structure. In addition, freshwater wetlands and flood hazard area regulations change. You heard Suburban mention some of the stormwater rule changes that are imminent. That also includes freshwater wetlands and flood hazard area. In particular, again, precipitation values changing with regards to hydraulic calculations for streams. So those are all things that we would have to be concerned with and cognizant of if the dam were to remain in place. Taking out the dam has some cons with it, and I listed those here. There is a potential for temporary sediment migration during the removal. What we do when we do a removal like this is remove it in stages. So we would end up taking it down in series of steps so that we can minimize any sediment that would be released. We can allow for dewatering of the sediment that exists in the impoundment. That can be done slowly over time. We talked through that a bit at the last meeting. But there is always the chance for small amounts of sediment to transport downstream. It's almost impossible to capture all of it, but we would be working closely with all the regulatory agencies and obtaining all appropriate soil erosion and sediment control certifications to ensure that we're minimizing that as much as possible. The biggest one for a pond is if there's a strong attachment to the pond. I mean, obviously this dam's attached to this building. The pond is right here. We will, lose that pond aesthetic. So, it's not very usable right now from a recreation standpoint, but the pond aesthetic and that sound of the water flowing over the dam does decrease. When we do the dam removal, there will still be riffles and grade control structures that will have an audible sound, but it won't be quite the same as the large spillway that exists out there now. In regards to cost, we had talked through that. Actually, the cost estimates for the upgrades to the dam that Borough presented and the cost for the removal are actually pretty similar. There's always the chance that the dam removal can end up being more expensive because of unforeseen conditions. We did complete the bathymetric survey and the sediment testing, so we know, generally what exists out there. And so those are actually fairly comparable in this case. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the last is the time for dewatering in the restoration area to establish. So we can't predict the weather. When I've done these dam removals in the past, I've had certain projects move really smoothly. We've had very little rain, and then you get a fairly reasonable time for dewatering and can get through reestablishing vegetation in one growing season. Other times, we have very wet conditions. 2018 in particular was a really, really wet year when we had some pretty significant dam removals going, and that took much, much longer to dewater. So when that happens, it will just be a longer time period for the former impoundment to become usable park space. So that's one of those cons to consider. This is the overall conceptual plan with the trail connections shown in brown on there. We have the existing trails that exist on the Minebrook Road side of the impoundment with connection that can be brought down into the current impoundment, and then the connections from the footbridge just downstream of the building, running along closer to the rail line, and then connecting back across the existing pedestrian bridge on the upstream side. In this concept, the large yellow area, we had talked about grassland bird habitat restoration. That's a big section of the existing impoundment, which would then become open for recreational opportunities. We had talked about adding benches and adding fishing access and working with native plants to add in potential pollinator gardens and things of that nature. The new channel will be kind of here in the lower section of the screen. You have this channel kind of going up through this section here, and then connected at the upstream end. These two gray and white rectangular shapes indicate the locations for those grade control structures, which will look like riffles that you would see in a normal stream channel with slightly larger rock needed, just given the need for complying with full hydraulic calculations and engineering standards. But they will look pretty natural. Most people wouldn't know that they were an engineered structure. That's the way we like to do the restorations for these projects, so that the general public isn't aware that there was engineering that went into it. There is a connection into the channel from this existing drainage feature that comes from the rail line that would also be maintained coming in. And we had talked about this, the rail side of the impoundment being restored as forested. It doesn't really make sense to bring trails into that area, and it would be a nice extension of the existing forested corridor that exists on that side already. So it makes sense to keep that side forested, whereas inviting the public more into the using of that grassland bird habitat area would make more sense, and then having the perimeter walking trail added in. So these are some images from some other dam removal projects that I have worked on. The one in the upper left shows what those grade control structures would look like during what's called a bankful storm event. So during a 1 to 2 year recurrence interval storm. So a storm you'd see, once a year or once every other year, you'd see the water swell to this elevation, and then you'll have that rippling effect across the stones. During more normal flow conditions, more of the rocks are out of the water, but that gives you somewhat of a sense of what that might look like. The lower left image shows a bioengineered stream bank in a former impoundment where we installed root wads. So engineered root wad toe protection reuses trees that would otherwise be chipped up or used for something else as both habitat and natural source for macroinvertebrate and fish habitat at the site. We also add in live stakes up the bank, but also still with the ability to get to the water table so that they can germinate. Those live stakes tend to be dogwood, sycamore, willow. Those are the typical species that are installed for live staking projects. And then I threw this photo in here of what some of the native wildflower, pollinator type species might be that could be installed. The one thing to keep in mind with the planting of that grassland bird habitat areas, you have a pretty large range of what would be allowed. DEP will want to see native plants, but keep in mind that some of those do turn brown in the in the winter and the fall seasons. So we'll want to make sure that when we work through those details, that we get a lot of public input on what that might look like. And this just goes through the general cost estimate of where everything comes out. This does include replacing the footbridges because both of those Ferrero had indicated are in need of replacement. I also included the removal of the 2 smaller dams that are downstream of the main dam, as well as the fish habitat features and everything else included within this. So our total cost estimate came out to $2.35 million with everything included from the last discussion.
Next question on that?
Sure.
You had said earlier in a slide that the costs were comparable.
Mm-hmm.
I recall this is 2.35 and
yes.
the removal was around a little over 2.7.
You mean the repair?
The
yes,
repair.
Their repair was actually higher, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you had said that there potentially could be grants available for this.
Correct.
Maybe you'll get into that.
That's the next slide. You're fine.
Okay.
So for the funding for removals, there's a lot of grant opportunities that exist. We have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act with up to $800 million designated for dam removals that is available. DEP's Office of Natural Resource Restoration offers funding for dam removals. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, NRCS, are other big funders of dam removal. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation offers rotating annual grants for dam removal. The Corporate Wetlands Restoration Partnership offers funding on an rolling application basis for dam removal. The Atlantic Coastal Fish Habitat Partnership has funding for dam removal. And then we had talked previously about the partners, several of which have already been to the site. Raritan Headwaters Association, Trout Unlimited, and the Nature Conservancy are all supporters of the removal of this dam and would be letters of support that we could include in grant applications. I know the Nature Conservancy also has some funding available for dam removals, although it's smaller, it can still be used towards the match that some of the larger funders require. And we had talked about what I thought might be available for the project through the various grants. I think we can assume that we could generate between 500,000 and $1 million of grant funding towards the removal.
Also, if we, restoration, there weren't any grants there.
Correct. Yes, if you move forward with the repair, the only option that Ferrero had found was the loan program through dam safety. There's not typically grants for dam repairs because most of the grant funding is tied to fish habitat and ecological restoration and improving flooding and water quality. So that's where the majority of grant funding exists nowadays.
And your firm will help us with the grants?
Yes, yep, that's something that I talked to Doug specifically about and included in the next phase estimate to provide support on the grant applications.
Sometimes those are challenging.
Yes, they can be, although I file these pretty regularly and I have good relationships with all these groups, so this would be fairly commonplace for the types of grants I file. And that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take additional questions, and that's my contact information. Yes.
You mentioned in the last presentation that when the dewatering process happens, that some of those native species will come up on their own.
Yes, they will. So what happens with these structures when they were built, and we talked through the era of this dam, I can't recall, I want to say this was 1910 maybe originally constructed and then replaced in 1970 after the one hurricane. But what happens with these is that they flooded out the area with all the native seed bed in it, and when we take out the structures, that native seed is still buried in the sediments, and we see quite a bit of natural native regermination happen as soon as it's exposed back and out of the water, which is a pretty impressive thing. Obviously, we have the invasives that are waiting to come in at all times, and I know these guys do that with their landscape architecture background, but you know, the natives that exist in the seed bank of these projects, if they have the chance to get established, will outcompete some of those invasives and offer a really good baseline to then add supplemental plants to.
I have a question more, I think it's for Tom, actually. The chief had raised last time potential flooding issues that may occur. I think it was irrespective whether we restore or restore the stream or restore the dam.
Yeah.
And I think Doug was going to take a look at that, I think separate or parallel effort, right, to make sure that we're covered for anything downstream. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, we talked about that actually. Doug mentioned wanting to look at the culvert downstream. With the change in the flood hazard rules that's imminent, Ferrero and I had discussed with Doug possibly wanting to just delay looking at that scope a little bit till we see what the new rules show. I've seen different drafts and I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like yet, and so we kind of wanted to wait to assess the best course of action, but that is definitely something that Doug wants to pursue.
There is a little concern there in that it seems like at the minute, at this time, the dam contains logs and stuff, like the traps and stuff. And concern is what they get wet in that culvert. So I think that has to be addressed. It has to be addressed anyway. But this is going to make more of a priority. Thank you.
Okay, then we will now have an open session. So if anyone in the public would like to ask a question, make a statement, please give your name and address. And if you're on Zoom, I guess either use the little icon or wave to, I guess, Anthony, are you watching that? Because I can't really see it.
It's a little different than what
Yeah.
I can see this list here. There's a couple of names right here I'm seeing.
Okay, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anthony will have a timer, so he'll let you know when your 3 minutes are up. So would anyone in the